Welcome everyone, Tuesday Night Call. I'm Jeff St Laurent with sellingcoaching.com. So we're going to launch into this. Before we get into it real quick, just a few things for especially the people that are on the recordings is I do record these, as I said, and I post them typically every Friday in the Selling Coaching University. So sellingcoaching.com, go to the university, we get all the call recordings there, and then also a bunch of other videos as well. And just on that point, I always like to say that, when it comes to your website, with a blog, I'm obviously a big advocate. Those of you that have followed me, who are in my private Facebook group, the Selling Coaching private Facebook group, and especially as we're doing this video challenge, this visibility challenge where we make videos over 91 days and learning how to become comfortable and stuff. I'm a big advocate of video for our coaching business in terms of marketing ourselves and how we get our message across more effectively, for people. And with the Selling Coaching University is a great example. It's a blog. It's a blog, but I call it the university to brand it differently. Along with Selling Coaching, what I'm teaching, and just a quick tip, for you as you create your website, or if you have one already. With your blog, you don't have to just call it a blog, and there's nothing wrong with a blog. It's great. It's identifiable. People know what it is. However, you can also brand it differently, like I did with the university, and it goes along with your brand. It gives it some different value, and then also where it can take it to the next level is especially if you start to use audio and or video, especially, it just gives it just so much more. I just say value because people can learn a lot more from that, and more importantly, as coaches, we're looking to convey our energy and our tone and our passion and a trust factor, because people will begin to become our fans and become loyal, and then ultimately buy something from us when something's offered, when they trust us and when we've helped them in some way. And just like this call tonight, it's just one of many offerings that I give to you guys as a part of my audience to just say, hey, let's do this together and let's focus. But also I like to point out those things so you can start to do those things on your own. So that's it in terms of resources. And then one last thing for the visibility challenge, like I said, in my private Facebook group, and easiest way to get there, if you go to the website, sellingcoaching.com, right at the top, you'll see a link that says, hey, join my private Facebook group. But if you're not in there, I urge you to check it out, especially right now. Like I said, we're group of coaches making 30 videos over 91 days. And whether you love them or hate them or don't know what the heck you're doing, that's the whole point, is to become comfortable, speak your message, hone your message, and then be able to create great videos that can market yourself and ultimately grow your audience. So definitely check that out if you aren't doing it already. But with that being said, I want to jump right into some content, and I want to keep tonight, short, sweet, and simple, but really deliver some really great information in terms of procrastination and how to leverage it and use it to grow your business, or you could just even say to create results. Because ultimately what we're looking to do as entrepreneurs is we get paid for creating results. We don't get paid for hours. And that's what we've got to do, is we've got to be able to monetize the efforts that we put in there. You can sit in your office for 8 hours and that does nothing. It's not about the amount of time, it's about the results you can create within that time. And when it comes to procrastination, everyone does it. I do it often, and I'm happy to admit that. And the best of the best do it. The difference is now, how can we use it to our advantage? And so there are a lot of reasons why people procrastinate, and who cares what the reasons are really? Whether they're valid reasons or not, they just do it. And so essentially what's happening with procrastination is it's just a stalling. People stall, and like I said, for whatever reason, and they push things off. And so what we want to look at is we want to start to understand what is it that allows someone to really procrastinate beyond all the reasons. And what I want to get down to tonight is kind of the stimulus. A stimulus meaning like what stimulates someone to do something or not to do something. And so I'll just break it down in terms of this. There's two different types of stimulus we'll talk about. There's a high stimulus response and then a low stimulus response. And typically the low stimulus response or low stimulus doesn't do much for us, right? If something's stimulating us very little, whatever it is we're talking about, not much is happening. And the typical way we've all been brought up, and you hear all the time, is, plan ahead, get things done ahead of time, do it so you're done and you're prepared so you can relax. But often what happens, the majority of people never do that. And there are people that definitely get things done ahead of time. However, after working with a lot of people over the years, I've just have realized, and including myself, that that's not the way the majority works. And the reason for it is, and that hence the procrastination, is because it's a low stimulus. Like if I've got something due, or I've got something I've got to get done in 3 weeks from now, where's the stimulus for me to get it done? Where's the incentive? There's no incentive, and hence there's no stimulus there. And therefore, what happens is I procrastinate and I procrastinate. And the worst part about this is that just not that I need to highlight why it's the worst part, but really understanding it is this: is the worst part about procrastination is that the whole time we're stressing out about doing it. Oh, I've got to get this done. Oh, I've got to do this. And it goes from this to-do list to the next to-do list. And then it goes from this day to the next day. And what happens is now ultimately, if something was due in 3 weeks, the 2.5 weeks or whatever go by. And the whole time, the 2.5 weeks, I'm expending stress energy, emotional energy around it. It's kind of like hovering in my subconscious the whole time, the fact that I've got to do whatever it is, and I'm not getting it done. And what that does is that wears on us. And I talk about this in a book I published back in 2009 called Being Fulfilled. And one of the things I talk about there is our energy points, and energy being our most valuable resource. We can always make more money, and there's always plenty of time because time never goes away. It's abundant, and of course, until we die. So, but the point is energy is something that you just can't get back. And when you're emotionally depleted and you're stressed, especially when you're using, like I say, more energy than you have every day, you go into an energy deficit. And if that goes on for too long, your body responds back with, I'll just say, disease, or if you break that down, dis-ease. So dis-ease is when the body is not at ease, not at rest, not peaceful, not aligned. And you stress, that's when you typically get sick, and so forth and so on. So that's the response of that stress response. And that's why procrastination is so detrimental, because at the end of the day, we're actually spending so much of that energy on nothing. And in the end, typically we get it done, but it doesn't work that way. So the whole time we're losing a lot of that energy. So let's look at the other end of this right now and say, okay, well, why does the last minute work so well? And at the end of the day, it's because it has a high stress response or a high stimulus. And even though in those moments it might feel really stressful, often we require that stimulus and that stress to really get us going. And I've been there many times, and I've got an event coming up in a couple days, and it's like I'm speaking in front of who knows how many people, and oh my God, I don't even know what the heck I'm talking about yet. Or even tonight, I've got a call tonight, and it's like I cannot come up with a topic until the last possible point I have to, before my son comes home from school, and I've got to be with him. And then even the bullet points around the topic, it's like I'm sitting here, before the call, and I'm coming up with the topics, but I can't focus. And this is that high stimulus. Without that stimulus, I can't focus on it. And call it ADD, call it what you want, but that is really where most people lie. I'm not diagnosing people here tonight, right? But most people lie in that I need that high stimulus in order to focus. And so if we start to look at that high stimulus, low stimulus thing, and you relay it back to maybe situations for you, yeah, there could be other reasons, but if you ultimately look at some of those reasons, it's going to fall down into, I'd say, one of those two categories. So now if you start to understand it better, you can say, well, if no wonder I'm not doing this, because at least we give ourselves some validation. Well, no wonder I'm not doing this now. There's no stimulus for me to get it done. So here's how we want to start to make it work for us. Is now we want to start to look at, let's say, a couple different strategies in order to make it work for us. And first, the piece is we've got to really understand how we work. I was chatting with Susan briefly before the call started when she called in, and one of the things she said was, starting to understand how she works and accepting that. And so part of this process for each of you is to understand, do I work well in the last minute? And one thing I'll say to you is that if you have something that's due or something you've got to get done, ultimately, does it always get done? And does it always get done to a high quality or caliber that you're happy with in the end? So if the answer is no, we've got to come up with some different strategies. I find for most people, again, the majority of them, that the answer is yes. Ultimately, they're like, yeah, I always get it done. I always hand it in. I always deliver it on time. And I always get it done, I do the the best quality work that I can do. So that doesn't suffer. That's a good thing. That's what we're looking for. If you don't get it done, we've got to start to look at other strategies, because now we're talking about, well, if a deadline comes up and you just don't do it, now we're dealing with some other issues there. I'm not going to get into that tonight. Like I said, that's not the majority. So if you're getting things done and you know that you get them done and you do them quality, what I'm going to pull off of here is you've got to honor that for yourself, and I'm going to throw the word trust at us, is to say we've got to start to trust that's how we work. So this is part of the first strategy is trusting ourselves, and that's where I'll give you those questions. Like I said, do I always get it done, and do I always do it to my best of my ability? And if you look back to example after example after example, you should find that, yes, the answers are yes, if that is the case with you. And if that's the case, that's where you've got to, in these moments where you start to, I'm procrastinating, I'm putting this off and I'm putting it off, and you're doing what I talked about earlier in the call, where you're using that emotional energy and you're stressing unnecessarily, like I said, this is where you've got to kind of take a deep breath, center yourself, and go back to this and say, okay, I've got to trust that I have the ability and I will do this. So the first strategy is quite simply, is wait till the last minute. And this is and these are strategies these aren't like theory strategies, these are strategies that I use literally every single day. And that work, and I know for me and clients that I've used them with have worked fantastic for them. So again, it's all how you work, but the strategy is wait till the last minute. So basically how this goes, very simple is when, let's say I'm talking on the phone with somebody and they're gonna interview me, and they're like, okay, so I need your bio and I need a brief description, what you're gonna talk about. And I go, okay, great. So before, I used to hang up the phone and I used to just procrastinate on it. And I really didn't have a deadline. I didn't know when they needed it by, and I would just put it off and put it off. And then all of a sudden I'd be like, well, maybe I'd get it done, but I didn't know when to do it. And I just kept putting it off. So now what I do is I always ask people, say, great, when is the latest you need this by? And this is the key thing is whenever you're doing something, especially with entrepreneurship, a lot of times there's not necessarily a date attached to it. So we need to ask, especially if it's for somebody else, we need to ask, well, great, when do you need this by? When is the latest you need this by? And that's the key part, is the latest. When is the latest you need this by in order to do whatever you need to do with it? So what I will do is let's just say they need it 3 weeks from now. So what I will do is I will go to my calendar 3 weeks from now. I'll back it up a day, just like as a buffer day. And I'll ask myself, okay, what is this task? And in this case, so I've got to do my bio and I've got to write topic of description. And I'm like, okay, really, how long is that going to take me? I'll tweak my bio for this and I'll do this, blah, blah, blah. Okay, it might take me 30 minutes. So the day before, or sometimes in this case with a 30-minute thing, the day of, I will block off 30 minutes in my calendar, and I will write, do X, Y, and Z for so-and-so, blah, 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 and anything I need to know. And then I close my book and I forget about it. And that's waiting till the last minute. Because I know if I try and do it right then and there, I'm not going to get it done. And that's going to keep moving on my to-do list, pushing back. And ultimately, when am I going to do it? I'm going to do it exactly when I scheduled it, the last possible day. So that's the strategy of waiting till the last minute. Okay, this works if there's someone or something waiting for it, or there's someone's going to be holding you accountable for it. I'm not saying it can't work, for something that maybe you're just doing on your own, like, oh, I want to set up a seminar, or I want to go talk to, or I'm going to make this phone call to so-and-so. Well, when's the latest I want to do it by? I want to do it by Friday, no later than Friday. Well, so you could put it in your calendar for Friday, but then Friday comes and goes, and you may or may not do it because that person doesn't know that you're supposed to call them or you want to call them, and then it's easily put off, and then you can procrastinate because maybe you're scared, maybe there's other factors, maybe you don't know what to say, and you keep pushing it off. So waiting till the last minute works very easily if, let's say, that person knew you were going to call them, or someone's waiting on it, or a group of people know that this is going to be doing. Like when I launched the Visibility Challenge, I launched I marketed it ahead of time, and I said, okay, launching on Wednesday, January 13th. And literally the weekend before and the 3 days before, I was up till 3 a.m. I'm just like going like hardcore into this thing. But I planned for it, and I knew that's exactly what I would be doing. And was I stressing? Absolutely. But doing it beforehand, couldn't do it. Zero stimulus. So I created the stimulus by leveraging it with other people. So in terms of waiting till the last minute, if you've got the leverage in terms of an expectation with a person, fantastic. If you don't, how to use the strategy is you need to create that leverage. And so how we create that leverage, I'll bring it into the second strategy, and I will just call it leveraging something you value. And this strategy right here is like, I wrote about this in my book back in 2009, Being Fulfilled. And this strategy right here, really listen to this, because this will allow you to get anything done, guaranteed, 100%. If you do it exactly the way I tell you, there's zero room for error. And I can say that super confidently. Here's why, all right? Let's just say it like this. You've heard people use the expression, oh, I'd give my left arm for that, right? And so what happens is well, let's look at that statement for a little bit, or oh, if I would do that, I'd give my left arm if I didn't do that, or something like that. So if you were to leverage, let's say your left arm, let's say you were to say, Jeff, you know what? I am going to write a book, and I am going to publish the book and have it in hand, ready for sale by June 2nd of this year. And if I don't do that, if I don't have so much as have the book in my hand on that date, you can cut off my left arm. Like literally you can saw it right off. And if I were to be legally able to follow through with that, and you believed that I could, and that was a real thing, would you have the book in your hands on June 2nd? Unequivocally, yes. Right? Any day you have writer's block, or you can't write, or maybe you lose your motivation, or things are hard, or whatever obstacle comes in the way, it's costing more time or money or whatever than you thought, it doesn't matter because you've leveraged your left arm. Now, we can't leverage our left arm because I'm not going to cut your left arm off, right? That's not a realistic thing. But if we're talking in theory, we understand what leveraging something we value means. Let me give you a couple examples of things we can leverage, because if you set this up correctly, like I said, you will literally have zero procrastination, or you're using it on your side in the sense where you're setting up a high stimulating circumstance or situation, and because you've leveraged something you value, you get it done. So for instance, when I was writing my book, I've brought that up a few times tonight, the publisher that I was working with, there was a $10,000 refundable deposit. And I knew going into this process, because I'd never written a book before, and I also had some really tight guideline, time frame of doing this book, that I would probably be needing some leverage. And so what I did was I went to the company. I said, listen, I want you to rewrite the contract, and I want it to be a $10,000 non-refundable deposit under zero reasons why I cannot get my money back. In other words, no matter what, they were going to keep the 10 grand. So if I so much as said like, yeah, you know what, I'm not going to write this book anymore, they're like, okay, that's fine. They're not going to give me my 10 grand back. Because I knew there was no way I was going to lose 10 grand because I couldn't write a book or because I had whatever excuse. There was no excuse too great to trump me losing $10,000. So what I leveraged there was I leveraged my money. And I leveraged it to a point where it wasn't even a consideration. There was no consideration. If it was $50, it might be like, yeah, you know what? Screw it. Maybe even $1,000 at some point. But I had to get to that level, and it was already, since the value was there, where there's just zero consideration for me, not doing it. That was one thing. So you can leverage your money. You can leverage your reputation. So I was working with my mentor coach at the time, and he was actually, part of it was his publishing company, and I had done a lot of work with him, and we did a lot of work together, and I respected him so much. And he was someone where, like I heard him talk about other people, and he would say it to people's faces too. Like, when people didn't follow through with things, he just didn't respect them. And it wasn't a bad thing. Don't get me wrong, but the point of it was like, I didn't want him to see me as maybe one of those people who just was all talk and all wanting to do something but didn't. So when I told him I was going to be publishing a book, and I was going to be publishing it through his company, and I wanted to have it, in my hands. At the time, it was actually January 1st at a big event that he was hosting. That for me was really big. So I knew that I was not going to have an excuse too great because I didn't want to look bad in his eyes. And again, if leveraging your reputation or your word or something like that with either people or a person that you really respect, that's a really big value for some people. And you've probably seen it yourself, but some people, or maybe even yourself, will do anything not to look bad in the eyes of others, or especially maybe certain people in their lives. Some people go so far as lying and cheating and stealing and doing, let's just say, things that aren't great to do that. So I'm not recommending doing that. But what they're doing is they're cutting shortcuts. But the point is it's valuable to the point where they compromise their morals in some cases. So these are some things that I'm bringing up now as examples, but also to give you examples of things that you can leverage if they're powerful enough. Again, if I didn't really care at the end of the day, screw it, I'm not writing a book, and I'm like, you know what, screw it, I don't care what he thinks of me, then if for a second that's even a consideration, leveraging that's not going to work. So you've got to go higher, you've got to get something bigger than that. A couple things I've done with clients over the years, just real quick to get another quick idea. I was working with a State Farm agent years ago, and one of the things she was talking about was just, she wanted to work out and just be healthier. And I said, hey, how long have you been wanting to do this for? And she's like, oh God, forever. So we came up with a contract, and she designed it. And basically she said, okay, I'm going to work out on Wednesdays and Sundays. And I'm going to do, she had something in her basement, like a treadmill or whatever. And she's like, I'm going to do 30 minutes on the treadmill. And then when I'm done at some point before noontime, I'm going to email you and let you know that I did that. And we set it up in the contract so much as if she didn't email me, she was going to lose what she leveraged. And for her, it was money. And I said, well, how much would it take for you to, not skip your workout? And we got to the point where we got to $1,000. And even at the $500 or the $700 mark, she's just like, I'm like, would you sleep in if you knew you're going to lose $700? And she's like, and she hesitated for like a second. I'm like, nope, not big enough. And we got to $1,000. She's like, oh my God, no way. So she wrote me a check in my name for $1,000, and she mailed it to me. And we set up the contract. And if she did the workout, but so much as didn't even let me know on those days that she did it, I would cash the check and it'd be done. And I told her, I'm like, as much as I don't want to cash the check because I don't want to just take your money to take it, because that means you didn't do it, I will cash the check very, very easily. I do want you to know that. And literally, when we set that up, before I even got the check in the mail, like after she mailed it, she literally never missed a day. And I haven't checked in with her recently, but even years after we stopped coaching, I would follow up with her, and every now and then I'd send her a quick email. I'm like, hey, are you still working out? She's like, oh yeah, and I've actually added days. It was so cool to see and hear, the long-term success with that. But again, it took leveraging $1,000 and knowing, she's rolling over in bed thinking like, geez, if I don't do this, Jeff's going to cash that check. And I don't want him to cash that check. And it got her ass out of bed and on the treadmill in her basement. See, what I'm saying is it doesn't matter if it's legal, as long as it's legal, ethical, and moral, who cares how you get the result? If you have to create some type of leverage, does that mean you're a bad person? Does it mean that you're not good enough? Or like, oh, I can't do this, or I don't have the motivation to do it myself? Who cares? You're getting it done. You're smart enough to figure out a way to get you to do it. My whole business, back when I was personal training, and then from 2004 on, where I've been in my full-time coaching business, I've operated, any result that I've ever created has been through this method, and I'm being literal with that. If I don't create that leverage in my business, and I'm saying this not for myself, but mostly for you to show you this, is that with entrepreneurship, there's no impending deadlines on what we want to do. If you're going to create a product or launch a program or do whatever you're going to do, there's no boss or someone saying like, okay, well, we're going to do this by this date. So until you make it real, until you book it, or pay the money, or let people know, or again, what you're doing essentially is leveraging something you value, then it's not going to get done, or it's going to be very painful to get done. And we can't have very painful in our business, because then it's going to kill us, and that's not a good thing. And that's why I'm bringing this up of, number one strategy, wait till the last minute, assuming there's a deadline, and assuming there's someone, right there, or something that's, going to be holding you accountable for it, essentially, creating that stimulus and trusting that you can get it done. And the second one, if that's not there, it's leveraging something that you value. And again, what that leverage does is that leverage creates the stimulus. And if we don't have that stimulus, it's not going to work for us. And again, I'm talking broadly, like, oh, this applies to everybody, but you've got to really take an honest look at yourself and say, is this me, and can this work for me? And I want to urge you, especially with the leverage piece, is that if it's not, and I did say this, but this is the vital point of this. If it's not something you're willing to lose, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. And what I said before about the 100% guarantee of results, meaning you will definitely get this done. This works flawlessly 100% of the time. The asterisk to that is if you leverage something that you value. If you don't, it doesn't work.